This podcast contains our own personal views, not associated with any organisation. Coronial contains descriptions of death inquests that may be graphic and disturbing to some listeners. Discretion is advised. Welcome back to Coronial, everyone. I'm Alice.
I'm Emma.
And I'm Georgie.
Today I'm going to be telling you about the inquest into the death of Mrs. Ada Holland, who died in March 2020 after 3 dogs attacked her on a public beach.
I think I've read this one.
I've definitely read reports of this one.
Yeah.
I can't remember if I went and found it.
Mrs. Holland, whose nickname was Sally, was 90 years old at the time of her death. She met her husband in high school and they got married in 1946. They had 4 children, were together for 65 years, and were often seen dancing around the house.
Cute.
Mrs. Holland taught sewing at 2 primary schools and was obviously an accomplished dressmaker.
Cute.
Yeah.
Teaching sewing at school. Stop it.
And I think it said that she made like the formal dresses for her daughters.
Ugh.
And
Nice.
Yeah.
Lovely.
she was a founding member of the Jarvis Bay Country Women's Association and was involved with Meals on Wheels, Red Cross, and collecting rubbish along the beach.
So this is my grandma. Okay, cool. Like, just, involved in all the community activities. Just, she would have been the social butterfly that knew everybody,
Yeah.
baked the best
Pretty
cakes.
I
Yes.
feel like at that age, though, you've got to be involved in a few different
Yes.
social activities.
She was nominated for Shoalhaven's Citizen of the Year Awards in 2008 and 2014.
Cool.
It didn't say exactly what for, but
Being a good citizen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
genuinely being a decent human being.
yep. She was part of a group of people who would go for early morning walks along Collingwood Beach, followed by a swim, and they called themselves the Collingwood Cougars because they were all over 50.
Stop it.
Yes. Oh, I love this.
She just sounds so...
All over
Cool.
50. She was
She was
almost
90.
twice that. Yeah.
But yeah, still regularly going for walks and
swims at the
swims.
beach.
Yeah. So firstly, I'll go through the history of the dogs involved in the attack and then the events on the day of Mrs. Holland's death. So the 3 dogs were all owned by the same couple. Brocky was a 7-year-old black/brown brindle male who weighed about 25 to 30 kilos. Letty was a 3-year-old brown brindle female who weighed around 25 kilos. And Calais was an 18-month-old white female who also weighed around 25 kilos. There was also a 4th dog owned by the couple, a 6-month-old male puppy, who was not involved in the attack because he was inside the house at the time that the dogs escaped. The couple had owned Bull Mastiff/Staffy Cross dogs since 2014, and as of 2020, their dogs had produced at least 4 litters.
Oof.
So they were breeding them specifically, or
I don't know. It doesn't go into...
They obviously weren't desexed.
I don't know that they were doing it on purpose.
Okay.
So Brocky and Letty were the parents of Calais and the puppy.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the puppies were given away to friends, friends of friends, or through Facebook.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, that is a lot of litters for the same dog to have. Like, so Calais was 18 months old and the puppy Buster was 6 months old.
Yeah.
And they had the same mother.
Yeah. How
So, like,
often
she's getting pregnant really
Frequently.
Yeah.
I don't know what the standard would be for...
Yeah, and how
I
long
think
their
you usually
gestation
leave
is.
like a year between or more between litters, just because
Yeah.
obviously they're then...
But how do you prevent that other than...
Well, yeah, if you're an actual breeder, you would clearly keep them separate.
Okay, right.
So under New South Wales regulation, dogs must be microchipped and registered with the council. At the time of the attack, none of the 4 dogs were registered, and only the older female, Letty, was microchipped. None of the puppies from the litters were registered or microchipped before they were given away. So the couple had been known to the council for non-compliance in relation to their dogs.
So why did they still have dogs?
Yes.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, go on.
Mm-hmm. In September 2014, the council issued final notices for the non-registration of 2 dogs named Nala and Lola, who were recorded as being bull mastiffs. In June 2015...
Wait, how many dogs did they have?
At the time of the incident, they had 4 dogs,
So they just had the 4.
but they in previous
previously
years
had the Nala and the Lola.
Yeah.
Okay.
In June 2015, the council issued a penalty notice for failure to provide veterinary treatment to an animal in their charge after they surrendered a 10-week-old bull Arab puppy to an overnight kennel. The puppy was emaciated, unable to stand, and had fleas and intestinal worms. It was sadly euthanized due to its condition.
But hang on, so this is a whole different breed as well to the ones that have been documented to be in their care. So does that mean they were also breeding
I don't
dogs?
think the breed of the dogs involved in the attack was necessarily known. Like, they were thinking they were bull mastiffs / staffies, but clearly there's just a bunch of dogs around.
But then a bull Arab was surrendered. Is that part of the litter to these ones? Or does this mean that there were other dogs?
Who knows where they got that dog from?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So at the inquest, the female owner stated that she thought the puppy didn't do well because of a congenital heart condition, and she couldn't afford to take the puppy to the vet for treatment.
Don't breed dogs then.
Surrender it earlier.
Yeah.
When you realise that it's not doing well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
When
don't
you
leave
think
it
it
to
has a
get
congenital heart
emaciated.
condition, surrender it then.
Yep.
Also in 2015, 2 penalty notices were issued for the failure to register 2 bull mastiffs, neither of which were those involved in the attack.
Great.
So potentially that was also Nala,
Nala
and
and
Lola,
Lola,
but
yeah.
there's no names recorded. In February 2018, a letter was sent advising that Letty needed to be registered. In March, a penalty notice was issued because Letty was still not registered. In August 2019, the council received notification that 3 dogs were being kept at the house in a poor condition, and this was Brocky, Letty, and Calais. And it was noted that none of the dogs were registered. The council issued a notice that the owners had 14 days to register the 3 dogs.
Or okay.
Yep.
Around August to September 2019, the couple moved with the 3 dogs and their 2 young children to a new house, and Buster was born shortly afterwards.
At which point they're probably in a new jurisdiction
Well,
or
yeah, I
different
think that potentially in a
council,
different
and so
council.
then it's not a problem because you just assume the dogs are registered.
Yeah. In early 2020, they had their 3rd child, so they've got 3 young kids now, plus the 4 dogs. In January 2020, another council penalty notice was issued for the failure to register Letty, but the other 2 dogs weren't mentioned. So the house they were renting was a single-storey house with an unfenced front yard and a large fenced rear yard. The front entrance is on the western side and a roofed carport is on the eastern side. Their lease stated that they could only have 2 dogs on the property. In October 2019, the real estate agent found out about the 3rd dog. The landlord was open to trialling having a 3rd dog at the property, but it was never actually formalised in the lease.
Right.
Needless to say, the couple did not tell the real estate agent about the 4th dog,
puppy.
Buster,
Yeah.
Well,
or the rest of the litter.
I'm assuming that the dog had more than one puppy.
You would assume so, yeah. The male tenant moved a metal gate from the rear of the carport to the front of the carport. The gate had thin metal bars evenly spaced across it. The hinges were attached to the front pole of the carport, and the gate shut against a drain pipe on the side of the house. The gate was kept closed with a chain tightened around the drain pipe and the fence. He then put a bamboo screen and green shade cloth along the gate to block the view of the front yard and to stop the dogs from pushing through the spaces in the gate.
Okay, so he's done all he can to try to keep them contained.
Well, how high is the gate?
Oh, I think it's reasonably high. And
Okay.
staffies and bull mastiffs aren't.
Yeah, they're
Really
not
good at
huge.
jumping.
Yeah.
They're kind of dense.
Yes.
They're stocky.
On the 8th of January 2020, the couple were given notice of the termination of their lease, and they had 90 days to vacate the house. The reason was because of noise complaints from neighbours, not related specifically to the dogs,
Oh,
but
good.
just general noise complaints.
Okay.
And they've got 3 young kids as well.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's a valid noise complaint reason.
Yeah, true. It'd be like yelling, music.
Yeah. Other things.
Mm.
But also, I'm just thinking these dogs are obviously dangerous, and they're young children.
Yeah, that's the thing. They haven't necessarily been defined as dangerous, though.
No.
True, and I guess
Obviously, yes, we know where this is going in terms
Yeah.
of they did cause death, but the council has cited that they're unregistered
Mhm.
versus the council hasn't cited that they think that they're dangerous animals.
and they're not dangerous breeds, are they?
They're not a restricted breed.
What's a restricted breed? those that are known to be dangerous?
Yeah, so restricted breeds in New South Wales are American Pit Bull Terrier or Pit Bull Terrier.
Yeah.
Japanese Tosa.
Yeah.
Dogo Argentino, which is an Argentinian fighting dog.
Mhm.
Fila Brasileiro, which is a Brazilian fighting dog. And then any other dog of a breed kind of or description whose importation into Australia is prohibited by the Customs Act.
Yeah. Okay.
So that it's like a very specific list.
Yeah.
But my understanding was like, when they're looking at registering dogs, if they've been concerns around them harming others, then they get registered as a dangerous
Yeah, they can
dog.
be either dangerous or menacing.
Yeah.
And we'll go into that
Oh, okay,
a little
cool.
bit later, yeah.
Yeah, that hasn't been picked up yet.
No.
No, I mean, they're not registered.
But there's been no evidence yet
Yeah, okay.
of them.
Doing anything.
Yeah. Several neighbours described instances of the 3 dogs roaming the streets and around the property unaccompanied.
Great.
At the inquest, the female owner didn't deny the possibility that the dogs had left their yard unaccompanied multiple times between late 2019 and March 2020.
Cool.
Great.
The dogs were not exercised much in that time since the couple had 3 young children, and the woman couldn't walk the dogs herself, which,
because they were strong.
Because there's 3 of them, and they're like 25 to 30 kilos each. So the couple also had relationship issues that escalated to an apprehended violence order in February 2020.
That will be the noise complaint.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so that meant that the male in that couple was not allowed to live at the property.
Right.
He seemingly was allowed to visit, but that wasn't where he lived anymore.
Okay. So again, that also limits how much exercise those dogs can get
Exactly,
because
yes.
he's not able to be there to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
And assuming that the 3 children are living with her.
Yes. They also had financial difficulties at this point, which meant the dogs were still being fed their usual dry dog food, but weren't getting the tinned food or meat that they had previously been getting.
But you can survive off of dried dog food
Yes,
so long
if
as
you're-
it's an adequate volume of
Yes,
food,
if
right?
you're getting enough of it. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. So like I'm not like super harsh about that point of like that's fine if you can't afford the more expensive food, but as long as you're feeding
just
them
more
sufficient.
Yeah,
like-
it depends on the volume.
Yeah.
Then.
And what the dog's used to. Like, they're used to eating meat. That's going to just be, it's going to be an adjustment
For them,
for
absolutely.
them
True,
to just
true.
then go to an all dry food diet.
Fair. Trying to convince them to eat the dry food might be challenging.
Yeah. On the 22nd of March 2020, the dogs left the yard and made their way to a neighbour's house. At 7:45 a.m, the neighbour arrived home from shopping and was unloading her car, which was parked in the driveway. She saw 3 dogs running towards her, and the smaller white dog, which was Calais, bit her right shin.
Oh.
This caused minor grazing and bruising. No, like, puncture wounds or anything, but she
Okay.
understandably screamed with the surprise and the pain
Yeah, okay.
of that
okay.
occurrence. The neighbour and her partner got in their car to find the dogs, which they did, and they took photos of them. They then followed the dogs back to the house and watched them push underneath the carport gate to get back into the yard.
Right, okay.
They called the council and rangers arranged to visit them that morning. The rangers were shown the photos of the dogs, her ripped jeans, and the injury to her leg. The rangers believed that a formal written statement was needed for action to be taken against the owners for any contravention of any regulations. The injured woman was given a document called Dog Attack or Threatening Dog Statement to fill out.
How many of us would have filled that out?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Depends how.
Do I know those neighbours? If I hear them having arguments all the time, I mean, it clearly wasn't like entirely like right next door. You're probably
Yeah,
not in
no.
hearing distance, but if I'm concerned for my safety because of their behaviour, am I going to fill that out?
Yeah, and yeah, we'll go into the reasons essentially why she didn't.
Yeah, okay.
Mm,
I don't know. I just feel like that's a strong risk
Yeah.
yeah.
that's not going to get filled
definitely.
out.
Yes. So because the rangers knew where the dogs lived,
Yeah.
which was super helpful, they actually went to the house to
Okay,
go and
cool.
talk to the owners. The couple said they didn't realise the dogs had escaped, but didn't deny that it had happened.
Yeah.
They brought each dog to the front door so they could be photographed and checked for a microchip. 2 of the dogs...
Each 4 of or 3 of the dogs?
it says each dog.
Okay.
I think it was all of them.
Okay.
Yeah. 2 of the dogs seemed skittish to the rangers, but none behaved aggressively. The reason given for the dogs not being registered was that they had no money and recently had a baby. The male owner said that he was going to register the dogs as soon as he received some money that was owed to him.
These dogs are like 4 years old.
Yeah, no, they're not getting registered.
You had them before you had said baby. That is no
Yeah.
excuse.
Yep.
You had them before you had
Probably
2
the
or
other
3
children.
of the
Yeah.
babies.
Yep.
Ugh.
During this conversation with the rangers, neither owner mentioned that the male was not allowed to live at the house and so was not able to regularly supervise the dogs.
Yeah, right.
The rangers informed the owners that the woman who had been bitten hadn't yet provided a formal statement, but that she might, which could lead to a fine. The owners assured the rangers that they would keep the dogs in the backyard and they wouldn't escape again.
Yes. Sure.
Yeah.
So the coroner pointed out that the rangers didn't ask the owners how the dogs had escaped, what they would do to stop them from escaping, or examine the fence and gate to make sure they were secure.
Yeah, fair.
They were essentially just taking the word of the owners that, yeah, we're all good. Won't happen again.
And it's like, why is there no continuity of like the fact that they've already been picked up on the fact that these dogs aren't registered and that they've already had issues made to them? Like,
yeah, and it does mention here that they also didn't ask the neighbours about previous incidents of the dogs escaping.
Yeah.
Which they had done. Like if they'd
Yeah, it was
talked to the
known
neighbours, the
to-
neighbours would have been like, yeah, those dogs get out all the time.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
Do
Like
that.
they do end up doing some checks, which I'll go through,
Oh,
but
okay.
they didn't inspect the fence or the gate where the dogs had gotten out.
Yeah, right. At which point they
So-
would have been like, yeah, cool, they're getting out this way.
Yeah,
That
you
needs
need to
fixing.
do something to fix
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And you've got no money to register them, so what makes me think you've got money to fix your gate?
Yeah. One of the rangers gave evidence that he did not usually inspect fences or gates to make sure dogs couldn't escape, and it wasn't a legislative or council policy requirement to do this.
Which is fair, and like, I guess if you don't get told to do it with your job, you won't. But how is that not a logical process?
Yeah, exactly.
How much is it to register a dog? Did it say?
It didn't, but that's
That's
pretty
right, I'll
easy
look it
to
up.
find out. Yeah.
It's not expensive.
But I think you need to pay more if you've got more than a certain number of dogs.
Yeah. And then is it a requirement that if you have a registered dog that they have to be microchipped as well?
Yeah, they need to be
Yeah.
registered and microchipped.
Yeah, which is an added expense.
So, okay, fine. Yeah, it's probably not as simple and cheap as I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, and de-sex dogs are cheaper than
Yes.
non-de-sex dogs. Okay, yeah. So, yes, all of these costs are going to be adding up. Okay, I forget. Apologies.
Oh, no, that's right. If you can't afford to register your dog, you shouldn't own it.
So, to register your dog in New South Wales, it's $78.
Mhm.
That's a one-off lifetime registration. And then you've also got to pay $184 if they're not de-sexed. So, for them to register all 4 of these dogs, it's essentially getting up to $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
Which is substantial, right?
Yeah.
And then if they're recognised breeding, then you also have to pay an extra breeding registration fee. But I guess they're not
They wouldn't be
technically breeding
recognised.
these dogs.
They're having accidental
Yeah.
litters.
I don't know if there's other regular fees, like annual fees or anything like that.
Mm.
And it doesn't say anything about microchipping.
Yeah, because that would be a vet cost rather than a council cost. Normally, you wouldn't get all 4 dogs at the same time and you just
No.
register them all at once.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you would register them as you get them.
But because they now have 4
Yeah.
and they're being told, like, you need to register all of them, then
Yep.
that's problematic.
Yep. The rangers then went back to the injured woman's house to let her know and her partner know that they had spoken to the owners of the dogs. They advised that the owners were remorseful, would make sure the dogs didn't escape, and would also be moving out in a couple of weeks.
Right.
They also advised that they were having financial difficulties and had recently had a baby.
Yeah.
After receiving this information, the injured woman was hesitant about proceeding with a formal complaint. She and her husband believed that the rangers would have made sure that the owners would keep the dog secured so it didn't happen again.
Yeah.
And they were also worried about the owners finding out about their identity if they went
Yeah.
ahead with a complaint.
Yeah.
Therefore, they decided not to proceed with the complaint, but would if they saw the dogs out of their yard again.
Okay. Yeah, that's the thing. In making a complaint, that would be my primary consideration, would be what if this happens to someone else and what if it's a young child or something that
Yeah.
this dog comes and bites. But then if you're reassured that,
It's not going to happen. And you're
It's not
feeling
gonna happen
bad about
again.
this family.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
then that
Yeah.
would potentially sway my
Exactly.
views as well. So I kind of understand that.
Yeah. The coroner noted that not having a formal complaint did not stop the rangers from seizing the dogs or declaring them dangerous or menacing. One of the rangers was aware of this, but the other ranger thought that a signed statement was needed to take those steps.
Right.
So there's clearly some confusion about what they can and can't do with what information they've got. Later that day, the ranger entered the details of the incident into the council's database and also checked for any records on the dogs or their owners. He noted that there were previous penalty notices for the male owner for non-registration of the dogs in 2014 and 2015. A check of the register showed no adverse incidents relating to the only dog who was microchipped, who was Letty. None of the other dogs were microchipped, so they had no records for him to check. But there wasn't any evidence of the dogs having escaped the yard or attacked anyone previously. But that's like entered into the council database.
Yeah, but also, did they escape at the previous residence?
Yeah.
Who knows?
So the male owner of these dogs thought that they had escaped the yard under the carport gate. After the rangers left, he put metal signs and a bench against the base of the gate on the rear side, with other items like a car battery used to keep the signs in place.
Oof.
He also
Sure.
wedged a yellow rectangular sign between the gate and the drain pipe it was chained to block the dogs being able to get under the gate.
What, one of those like caution?
It sounds
Slippery
like
when wet.
he was just getting
Random
road
signs.
Yeah.
Let's assume that these are things that he got
Yep.
in a correct manner.
Let's hope so. Okay, so on Sunday the 29th of March 2020, Letty, Calais and Brocky left the backyard by pushing their way under the carport gate near where it's shut against the drain pipe.
Which is not where he'd protected.
It is where he protected.
Oh, so they still managed to get through
Yeah.
that anyway. Okay.
So the female owner was woken up by a metallic noise coming from outside.
Right.
She got up to see what was going on and saw that the three dogs had escaped from the yard. She left the property to find the dogs and eventually made her way to Collingwood Beach, which is where she found.
What did she do with her kids?
Well, the male owner was actually in the
Oh,
house
okay.
as well. Asleep,
Oh.
apparently.
Yes, right. Not staying over.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Not living there.
One of Mrs. Holland's friends, who was 79, was walking along the beach that morning to meet up with Mrs. Holland and go for a swim. When the dogs arrived at the beach, they approached the woman and started to attack her. They bit her hands, buttock, thighs, and lower legs and pulled her to the ground.
Holy shit.
Yep. She tried to stand and screamed for help. The owner of the dogs had arrived at the beach by this point. She obviously saw this woman being attacked and went over to try and
Get them off.
intervene,
Yeah.
but she was bitten as well. The dogs then ran off down the beach while the owner stayed with the woman and called 000.
And now
Okay.
they're in an aggressive, hyped up state.
Yep. So Mrs. Holland was walking along the beach to meet her friend and her daughter when the dogs came up to her and started attacking. Mrs. Holland's daughter was also walking along the beach, so like there were all three of them.
Like converging on the one place, yeah.
Yep. When she noticed her mother being attacked, she ran over to help her, but when she got close, the dogs ran at her, biting her legs and hands and pulled her to the ground as
Yeah,
well.
right.
They then stopped attacking her and went back to attacking Mrs. Holland.
Oh, my God.
Yep.
So this just destroyed like several people's lives.
Yeah, a little bit. Yep. So many people tried to distract the dogs, including a neighbour who had heard the screams and went down to the beach to help. He was bitten on the right forearm by the dogs, but before they ran away from him.
Okay. He got them away, I guess. Small
Yeah,
mercy.
Pretty much, and he was only bitten once.
Yeah. In that situation, what do you do when you've seen the dogs attack multiple people? It's
Yeah.
like, I don't want to try and coerce them away towards me.
Towards
No.
me, yeah. Paramedics, New South Wales police officers, and Australian federal police officers arrived to assist. So
Seems
it's
fair.
interesting that the
Do we
AFP
have
was getting
animal
involved.
control?
Because someone would have had to shoot these dogs if there was
true,
concerns
yeah.
that they
That's
needed
true.
to, like if they were continuing to attack people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I can understand why the AFP came, because you'd want,
backup.
yeah.
Mrs. Holland had suffered extreme injuries, including tearing on her upper and lower limbs and injuries to her torso. And remember, she's 90 years old.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much to tear through her skin, right?
Yeah,
Her skin
yeah,
is paper
yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stereotypically.
Yeah. Paramedics gave pain relief on the beach and then moved her to the ambulance, where she went into cardiac arrest and CPR was started. She was taken by ambulance to a nearby football field, where she was met by an emergency doctor and rescue helicopter. Further treatment was given on the Oval, but Mrs. Holland didn't improve, and she was pronounced deceased at about 8:30 a.m.
Ugh.
Meanwhile, back at the beach, several ambulances were treating other injured people because there were many of them. And the dogs were also seen in that area. So they'd sort of moved from the beach and they were now hanging around where the ambulances were.
Yeah, so like they've not been contained at this point.
No.
They're still free roaming.
Yeah. So the female owner was yelling at the dogs to go home and was trying to coax them away from the ambulances.
I wouldn't want the dogs to go home where my 3 young kids are.
Well, but I think it's more
what
just
else
like
are you meant
get
to
them
do?
away from the area. Yep. She was eventually able to coax the dogs into the rear of a council ranger's vehicle and they were taken to an animal shelter.
Yeah,
So
right.
they were eventually able to
Get them
for rolling.
away.
Yep. Council rangers and police then attended the owner's house and seized the 4th dog, Buster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Mrs. Holland's friend, who was the first one who was attacked, was taken to hospital. She needed surgery and she stayed there for a week. She had multiple lacerations and puncture wounds to both her arms, her upper right leg, and all along her left leg, and she needed 120 stitches.
Far out.
Mrs. Holland's daughter had lacerations and puncture wounds to her right hand and forearm, left wrist, right lower leg, left calf, and left thigh, and she needed 48 stitches.
Horrible. And she's going to have them and be thinking about her mother
Mhm.
the rest of her life.
Yep.
And presumably she's the daughter of a 90-year-old, so
Yeah,
she's
so
in
she's
her 60s to,
70s, potentially. A veterinarian inspected the dogs at the animal shelter on the same day of the attack. The 3 older dogs displayed aggressive behaviour, and all the dogs were in very poor physical condition and malnourished.
Do dogs become more aggressive the more malnourished they are? Like, is it a hunger thing?
They could do.
Yeah,
it's
but
not
it's
going to
not.
be the only reason, but
Okay.
it is possible.
Yeah, okay.
Though they're not generally attacking people
For
for
food.
food.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
It might lead them to be a little more heightened than they
Normally.
would.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah.
So all 4 dogs were emaciated and had fleas, and they were all euthanized that day at the shelter. So the police did a walkthrough of the property where the dogs were being held, but not in a good way. The bamboo sheeting in front of the gate was old and had broken away in places. The yellow sign was pushed towards the eastern side of the gate. The male owner showed the police some broken cable ties on the ground on the front yard side of the gate, and a small amount of dog hair on the bottom of a bamboo shaft near where the gate shut. He believed that the dogs had pushed the sign aside from inside the carport, which gave them access to a space beneath the gate that they escaped from.
Yeah.
The paving where the gate shut against the drain pipe was dipped, and the police measured a 17-centimetre gap between the ground and the bottom of the gate in this
So
spot.
they also could have,
and the gate could
pushed through
also be
there.
pushed upwards.
right,
So even though 17 centimetres, and then
Yeah.
they could push the
Push
gate.
up.
up
Yeah.
to be able to,
And they're
Yeah.
also really malnourished, so they're pretty
Probably not
skinny.
that big.
small.
Yeah.
And like all animals, cats, dogs, etc., they always find what you think is impossible for them to get through.
Yeah, and they
make it through.
The police investigation found that the steps taken by the male owner to keep the dogs in the backyard was completely inadequate. I think we can all agree with that.
Yep.
They'd got out on multiple occasions.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Both owners were charged and prosecuted for being the owner of a dog that attacks another person, whether or not injury is caused.
I didn't know that was an offence.
I don't know that they prosecute it that often,
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
but in this case it's pretty
Warranted, for
extreme.
sure.
Yeah. The female owner entered a guilty plea to 2 charges, and the male owner entered a guilty plea to 1 charge. On the 9th of May 2022, each of them was convicted and fined $5,000. They were both disqualified from owning a dog for 5 years.
But it doesn't really matter because they lied about owning the dogs in the first place.
Yeah.
Why did the female get more charges than the male?
I do not know.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
The coroner noted that the maximum penalty that could have applied was an $11,000 fine and a 5-year disqualification from owning a dog.
That doesn't seem right. Just
Yeah.
no more dogs for you.
I agree. It should be a lifetime ban.
But also,
Well, it's hard though because like if you on a one-off, the dog gets out of your care or something like that because of some freak
Yeah, but like
accident.
it's like anything. It's like up to a lifetime ban.
Yeah. true,
having
true.
a maximum
Fair.
penalty
Yeah.
is a lifetime ban.
Yeah,
doesn't have to
okay.
be
Judge
the
can
thing
use
that's-
discretion.
yeah, fair.
Yeah. But yeah, like that is, to me, that's a pretty lenient penalty.
And I also just don't
agree.
think it's going to mean anything because they were never
Yeah.
registering their dogs in the first place. So
Yeah.
they'll just go get more dogs.
Yep.
And they just will continue to be not registered. It actually kind of like promotes them not registering them
Yeah.
because they can't
Mhm.
because they're not allowed to have them.
Yep.
So it's also a pointless rule.
Yep. At the inquest, the coroner looked into whether the council response on the 22nd of March up to the 29th of March, when Mrs. Holland died, was appropriate.
Yeah.
The Companion Animals Act 1998 states that if a dog attacks or bites any person or animal, except vermin, an authorised officer may, at any time within 72 hours after the attack or bite, secure the dog on property that the officer has reason to believe is occupied by the dog's owner, or seize the dog. So they did have the ability to seize Calais
At that point. But again, they didn't have to.
No.
And they did believe that, well, they knew it was getting out more than once, didn't they? They knew the dogs had roamed before because they...
No, because they never talked to the neighbours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in their mind, they were doing the right thing because they thought it was a one-off freak act. Although that being said, do most dogs that get out bite people?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very few.
Yeah.
It also states that if an officer attends a premises when the owner is home, they can seize a dog only when they're satisfied that the dog cannot be adequately secured on the property, or the dog cannot be kept under the effective control of a competent person while it is on the property, or the owner of the dog has repeatedly failed to keep the dog secured on the property or under the effective control of a competent person. And that's regardless of whether the dog is secured or under effective control at that time.
And so none of that mentions anything about the fact that they'd been previously reported for not registering their dogs. So, like, there's no right for them to have removed them at that point because they were unregistered, and persistently this couple continued to not register their dogs.
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, well, if you breached that multiple times, that should be a reason for them to remove them from you.
Yeah, I would have thought so too, but it doesn't
appear to be a thing.
I think you get penalty notices, like you get fined for it, but
they didn't even get fined. They just got a penalty notice. Did they even say that?
They didn't mention that whether the fine was involved with that.
But again, what does that fine mean?
Yeah.
Do you just not pay it, or pay it back at 10 cents a week for the rest of your life?
Yep.
Anyway.
The coroner found that the rangers who attended on the 22nd of March had reasonable grounds to believe that one of the dogs had attacked or bitten someone, because they had the evidence. One of the rangers said that since the owners were home when they attended and appeared to be competent persons, he had no authority to seize the dogs.
Which he did, though.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
The other ranger said that he didn't consider seizing the dogs because the owners had assured him that they would keep the dogs secured in the backyard.
Yeah.
The Companion Animal Act also states that an authorised officer may declare a dog to be dangerous or menacing if it meets the definition. So a dog is dangerous if it has, without provocation, attacked or killed a person or animal other than vermin.
Mm-hmm.
They're allowed to kill rats.
Yeah.
Fair.
Mice. Or has, without provocation, repeatedly threatened to attack or repeatedly chased a person or animal other than vermin. Or is kept or used for the purposes of hunting. And interestingly, I was like, I feel like there's a lot of country dogs that are used for hunting. But the dog is not to be regarded as being kept or used for the purposes of hunting if it is used only to locate, flush, point, or retrieve birds or vermin.
In what circumstances would a dog be hunting then if it's actually killing?
Yeah, if it was the one attacking.
I don't imagine that would be a very common
Yeah,
thing.
that's what I'm
so
thinking.
Either. Yeah. Dog is classified as menacing if it has displayed unreasonable aggression towards a person or animal other than vermin, or has, without provocation, attacked a person or animal other than vermin, but without causing serious injury or death. So they consider serious injury to be any injury that needs hospitalisation, a broken bone, a major laceration, or an injury that requires cosmetic surgery.
So any injury, really.
Basically.
You're going to sustain from a dog bite.
Yeah, small dog bite, you're not necessarily going to go to hospital.
True, yeah, fair.
So in terms of the timeline of declaring a dog dangerous or menacing, the ranger first issues the owner with a notice of intention to declare the dog dangerous or menacing. The owner then has 7 days from receiving that notice to make objections. The ranger then considers any objections before deciding whether or not to actually proceed with the declaration. If the declaration is made, the ranger has to notify the owner of the decision and the consequences of that. The owner then has a right of appeal to the local court. So if a notice of intention to declare Calais had been issued on the 22nd of March, the earliest time a declaration could have been made was the 30th of March.
Which was the day after.
The
So they
attacks.
still would have been in the possession
Yeah.
of the family.
Yep.
Yep.
However, on receipt of the notice of intention, the owner must make sure the dog is under effective control of a competent person by means of adequate chain, cord, or leash, and has a muzzle securely fixed whenever it's outside the property, and ensure the dog, if it's not already registered, is registered within 7 days of receiving the notice.
Yeah.
A ranger can seize a dog that is subject to a notice of intention if the interim control obligation has not been complied with, the dog is not confined, tethered, or restrained in such a way as to prevent the dog attacking or chasing a person lawfully at the property where the dog is normally kept, or the dog is not registered, regardless of whether the 7-day period from the issuance of the notice has expired. Which I find really interesting. Like, we're giving you 7 days to register the dog, but if you haven't done it in 2 days, I technically can seize your dog.
If that had happened, do you think that they would have just given them up?
I don't. Doesn't seem like it. As of the 22nd of March 2020, only one dog, Calais, could have been the subject of a notice of intention to declare her menacing or have been seized.
Right, yeah.
but
only one
not
of
the
them.
other 3 dogs
Yeah.
also owned, because none of the other dogs
Yeah.
had bitten anyone.
Yeah, okay.
The coroner noted that the potential seizure of Calais couldn't be overlooked, because if she had been seized, then proper steps may have been taken by the owners to keep the dog secure in the yard and preventing them from escaping again. Like, maybe they would have taken that seriously.
Yeah, you just don't know.
Yeah.
But you don't know.
Well, he did try. Like, they did take it seriously in the sense that he did put more fencing up.
Yeah.
He obviously didn't have the capacity to actually,
do it
Mm.
properly.
yeah, which is probably costs and skills associated. They did actively do stuff. They didn't turn around and be like, we're going to do nothing because we don't think they're a problem.
Yeah. The coroner found that the approach taken by the council was inadequate. The rangers should have inspected the fencing at the property to work out how the dogs escaped on the 22nd of March, and should have then returned to the property in the days after to check that they had taken steps to fix the gate.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if they had done that, then they would have been like, actually, this is not adequate.
Quick.
We're taking all the dogs.
Dogs, yeah.
At the inquest, the head of the Ranger Services Unit at the council advised that their previous practices had changed since this death, and they now promptly issue a notice of intention to declare a dog menacing and subsequently return to the property to ensure that the dog owner is complying with the obligations under that notice.
After how many days?
It doesn't mention number of days, but
Yeah.
they
okay.
actually do
They
go
do
back.
return.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've implemented a zero-tolerance approach to non-registration, whereby
Good.
rangers must issue penalty notices when dogs are found to be unregistered instead of a compliance notice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
the compliance notice is just like, oh, we know your dog is unregistered, you need
You've
to
got
do
14 days to register it, and then
Yeah.
there's no consequence.
it. Otherwise, it's like, no, you actually are getting
Yeah.
fined or whatever they impose for that.
Yeah.
If a ranger is satisfied that an attack by a dog has occurred and can identify the dog or dogs involved, the rangers must issue a notice of intent to declare the dogs menacing or dangerous. The council has changed its standard operating procedures to provide rangers with better guidance on the declaration process, timeframes, and statutory powers under the Companion Animal Act. And they also implemented in 2023 a training guide about the seizure of animals and the issuing of notices of intent to declare. So the coroner also briefly discussed dog breeds in that staffies can inflict significant injuries, but prohibitions of certain breeds is complex, and there are actually other inquests in progress at the time that were considering dog breeds.
It's interesting because can't all dogs inflict...
Exactly, and this is, I'll go
Yeah.
through the recommendations in a minute, but there's one recommendation that I absolutely do not agree with. Because
Yeah.
it's like any dog can bite someone.
Exactly. Like,
Dogs
yes,
with bigger mouths, like bigger jaws, can obviously inflict more injuries, and multiple dogs together will
Yeah.
then inflict more serious injuries.
But it's also going to depend on the size of the person, because if a chihuahua
exactly.
goes at a 2-year-old,
yeah, it can
the
bite,
the chihuahua might actually
cause
do
some
some
cause some
damage.
significant injury.
Yep.
If the chihuahua goes at an adult, I'm going to flick it away.
Yeah,
You
Not
know?
if it grabs hold.
yeah,
It could cause some injury to some fingers.
absolutely.
True.
And like, yeah, just the focus on breed. I'm like, it's not
Yeah.
It's not the breed, it's the way that the dog is
handled and
yeah,
brought
Yeah.
up, right?
Yeah.
And but also treated.
housed and fed and
Yeah.
all those sorts of things.
Yeah. But also the nature of that specific dog. And I think, sure, there's some breeds that have a more
There's more propensity.
stereotypical basis of aggressive behavior where we think that, sure, staffies, pit bulls, etc., make us a little bit more scared. But also I've met some incredibly gentle staffies
Oh,
that
yeah,
are like,
Exactly.
And some really aggressive chihuahuas.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. I think it's also much like every human is individual. Every dog as well is going to
Absolutely.
be individual and have its own individual nature. So you can't define specific to breed
Yep, absolutely. And the onus should be on the owners
to
to
recognize
make
that.
sure, yes, or to secure them appropriately. So the coroner had quite a few recommendations at the conclusion of this inquest, so bear with me. To the Shoalhaven City Council, they recommended that the council review its procedures and the training provided to rangers for responding to reports or suspected cases of dogs leaving their yard and or being involved in an attack, to ensure that rangers, wherever reasonably able to, inspect a property's fencing, with specific regard given to whether the power to seize the dogs is reasonable. Inspect any changes made to the yard's fencing to independently evaluate improvements to make sure that they can't leave the yard unaccompanied. Inquire with nearby residents to check if persons living near to the dogs report anything of concern about the dogs or their owners. Consider the known history of compliance with the relevant regulations and what this may indicate as to the likelihood an owner will implement measures to secure their dogs.
Absolutely. Like these people were already known to be non-compliant.
Yep. And ensure a specific record is made in the council's electronic records for a particular owner, which can readily be searched by other council rangers,
Yep.
of known or suspected instances of the owner having provided false, incorrect, or misleading information to council rangers. And that the council develop guidelines and training regarding what matters might properly inform a ranger's evaluation of an owner's competency to effectively control and secure a dog. Because, like, the rangers were essentially there, like, oh, yeah, these are two adult people who don't seem to have anything that doesn't make them a competent person.
Yeah, right.
But they didn't really go into the fact that she couldn't walk them alone, and he wasn't technically living there.
And they had 3 small children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the Office of Local Government, they recommended that they develop a standardised training package for council rangers employed with councils in New South Wales as a whole that are expected to respond to reports or suspected cases of dog escapes and or attacks. That training would include the assessment of a dog's risk of future attack by reference to the known or suspected breed or type, the number and type of dogs at a premises, and any queries that may relate to this assessment. The assessment of a dog owner's competence to adequately secure and control a dog, and the preconditions and factors relevant to exercising statutory powers of seizure and to issue notices to declare. Also, that the Office of Local Government examine the possibility of the enactment of a statutory limitation on the number of dogs of the same breed or mixed breed or type, e.g. staffies, that can ordinarily reside at a specific premises or be under the control of owners living there. Again, that's not something I necessarily
That's going to be really
agree
hard.
with, like, breed-based, like the total number of dogs, absolutely.
No, but if it
matter
has a
what type
litter.
they are. I think that would be a different situation. Some complexities in that.
It's so hard to then define. And if your house is large and you've got a large property and it's well fenced and you're well contained, who has the right to say that you can't have 50 dogs living with you?
Oh, I mean, 50 dogs is a lot, but
yeah.
like,
But there already are limitations on that.
yeah, there are.
Are there?
Yeah.
Oh.
Brisbane City Council, if you have only 1 or 2 dogs, they have to be registered, but you don't need a permit.
Yep.
But you need a permit if you intend to keep more than 2 dogs.
Right.
Yes.
Council is unlikely to approve a permit to keep more than 4 over the age of 3 months, unless you're a breeder.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, like, I assume that New South Wales would be pretty similar.
Okay.
So you actually need to, apply for a permit.
Yeah.
One of the other recommendations was that the Office of Local Government examine the appropriateness of the statutory thresholds and framing of the provisions in the Companion Animal Act for the issuance of notices to declare a menacing or dangerous dog, which extends to ensuring greater clarity as to whether the dangerous dog threshold requires the occasioning of serious injury. Like, could you do it if there was an attack but it wasn't a serious injury? The Office of Local Government review the adequacy of the statutory provisions in the Companion Animal Act and the regulation about the maximum penalty for non-compliance with registration and microchipping, including in the case of repeated non-compliance. The maximum penalties for an owner of a dog who does not take all reasonable precautions to stop the dog from escaping the property. The maximum penalties for an offence of a dog rushing, attacking, biting, harassing, or chasing any person or animal when the dog is not a dangerous, menacing, or restricted dog, including consideration of introducing an increased maximum penalty in cases where a person suffers a serious injury or death.
Yeah.
The maximum period of disqualification of owning an animal, I assume, like, look into extending that, especially in cases that involve serious injury or death. So again, that would be like, making it a lifetime
ban. Can it ever be tried as manslaughter? Like,
I don't think so.
Look into what manslaughter, the actual definition is.
they didn't get jail time. They got a $5,000 fine for the loss of someone's life and injury of several others. And I'm like, is that
it's
adequate?
a tricky one because, like, they were
actively non-compliant with other regulation. And I think that's the bit, again,
This
freak
wasn't
accidents happen, but they continued over several years to own unregistered dogs and breed dogs in what doesn't seem like a registered, identified manner.
Yeah.
That therefore they were actively going against the regulation. That makes me think of, like, is a $5,000 punishment actually going to deter them?
Yeah.
Because, again, I'm not imagining that they're paying that $5,000 fine particularly quickly either.
Yeah.
It'll be $5,000 over the rest of their lifetime.
Yep.
So what punishment is that actually?
The coroner also recommended looking into including in the Companion Animal Act an additional standalone offence of a dog attack causing serious harm or death to a person.
Yeah, right.
And then that could have different penalties associated with it.
Okay, fair.
Because they were charged with being the owner of a dog that attacks another person, whether or not injury is caused.
Yeah, right.
So then
So that seems
creating
quite
a standalone
minor.
offence, which is serious injury or death, that would then have, like, higher penalties.
Absolutely.
You would hope.
Yeah, you would hope. And I mean, like, because, in that previous offence, like, it could just be they've attacked a person, but they might have just ripped a piece of their clothes.
Yeah.
And that's then the same maximum penalty as
death.
As death.
Yeah.
So that really doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So the last recommendation was that the Office of Local Government, in consultation with local government councils in New South Wales, consider implementing a public awareness campaign emphasising the dangers posed by specific breeds and types of dogs. And this is another one that I do not agree with because...
No, just risks
a
of dogs.
public awareness campaign, so you want to make people scared of a bunch of different breeds? Like, you need to be dog aware in general.
Yeah.
But that is regardless of the breed.
And that's so hard for those families who do own those types of dogs to then be, like, super shunned because they own that type of dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know the circumstances in which they became the owner of that dog. Like,
yeah, it should be public awareness as to how to approach and interact with dogs.
and don't approach and interact with dogs without other people's permission.
Yeah, and also for owners about adequate control and securing them in your yard. Like, it should be on the owners. It shouldn't be on the general public.
That's what I think. Like, the responsibility has to be of the owner of each individual dog, right? Like, it shouldn't be public awareness. It's the whole, like, obviously this is pushing it very far, but it's that whole, like, concept of victim blaming.
Yeah.
It's like it's your fault, even though you didn't do anything. That owner let his dog off the leash and then you got attacked by a dog. That's not your fault.
Yeah.
As a person who doesn't have a dog, I don't like other people's dogs running at me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
And I'm not afraid of dogs, but, like, I just don't like that.
Yeah.
You don't know that dog. You don't
Yeah.
know that they're running towards you in, like, a friendly, I love you way.
Exactly. And
Or
I
I'm
don't
gonna
like
bite
other
you.
people's dogs jumping on me. Like, it's different when you're at their house or whatever, but, like,
Yeah.
just out in the park.
public.
Like, I don't want your dog jumping on me.
Yeah. People knowing how to interact with dogs would be helpful.
And
It
then
would
just
be, but
people
again,
being
I'd-
better owners.
Yeah,
I just
that's
don't think that's a responsibility of people.
if you don't like dogs, then you're not going to be approaching
No,
it. Don't
yeah,
get me wrong. But it's
exactly.
the people that are unaware and then approach a dog.
Yeah,
that I think
that's
as well.
different.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I just think there's way more nuance than just some breeds are dangerous. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much more than that.
Absolutely. Thank you. I knew about this one, and so I hadn't read it in detail. I just glossed over it, and so it was interesting to hear some significant failures there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And such a long history of non-compliance, but nothing.
And I think there's been
done.
a few dog attack coronial inquests released over the last number of years, and then a few that will be pending. That I think it's a really interesting topic in terms of how do we better maintain people's safety when it's completely outside of their control. They were walking on the beach, they weren't provoking a dog, they weren't trying to interact with it, they weren't doing anything. So
because I know there's one where it was an owner got attacked in her own home.
Yes, and that dog had been reported to be menacing before. I think
it had been and she
but not
kept
towards
it
her.
That's right. And so she'd kept it inside and
so she
in
was
a confined environment.
Kind of what she should in terms of
exactly.
She wasn't letting it escape and attack anyone else.
No, but then it turned on her.
Yeah.
And then there's also I don't think it's been released yet, but I assume there's going to be a coroner's The Mailman.
Yeah.
Penalties for these sorts of things should be higher than $5,000 and 5 years non-ownership of a dog.
But even then, if you gave them a lifetime ban on ownership, I don't think that's
no.
gonna matter
I'm
for them,
saying
but
it should be potential imprisonment.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think in that instance, and I don't think that they needed a long imprisonment. It's not like they set out to harm someone; they weren't actively seeking to harm an individual.
No, but also your
But their
actions.
that
negligence
should be a bit of a deterrent there.
Exactly. Your actions have severe consequences.
Yeah.
And you knew that your dogs were dangerous because at least one of them had attacked someone before, and you knew they were able to escape. Even though you did put measures in place to try and prevent that, they were obviously not good enough because they were able to escape several times. There's a certain point where you've got to be you're an animal owner, you have responsibility, and your actions have consequences, and your actions led to the death of someone.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder though, they knew it had attacked someone. I wonder if they'd attacked in the house before as well.
Who knows?
That's possible.
Yeah, that they just didn't disclose.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But I can also see that they're in such a hard place that they didn't have a lot of ability to resolve a lot of that.
Had the dogs.
Oh, agreed.
Well,
they should have surrendered them. Absolutely. I think they should have surrendered
even
them.
had them in the first place.
But they, clearly were also not in a good place that then also made a lot of those decisions a lot harder for them to make as well.
Yeah.
But agreed. I think it's so frowned upon to surrender your animal, but when there's a point that you can no longer care for it appropriately, that does need to be a consideration.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that needs to be then more socially acceptable. That you've done the right thing for others.
Yeah, realistically, vet clinics and animal shelters will not judge you for surrendering a dog.
Because they just want to see that dog
you just want to
well
see it
and healthy and safe.
taken care of. So if you can't afford it, please surrender it. We want you to do that. Don't just keep it at home and let it
until
die.
it's emaciated. Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We will catch you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.